Well, John, happy 2025. It's been way too long since we last chatted. I hope you're doing well, my friend.
All is well. Valentine's Day here.
Valentine's Day. Hey, in Oklahoma, it's cold. That's why I am connecting with you today from home. I thought if I didn't have to go outside, I'm not going outside. It is cold for Oklahoma. I can't imagine how cold it is in Pennsylvania. It is homecoming for my oldest daughter. And then tomorrow night is her semi. I have never had this experience before as a father, and I don't know how to quite react. But I do know that semi dress shopping took a while. I luckily when we went to the shops, there was what I call the dad seats where you can sit on the couch and read or sit on your phone while mom and daughter are trying on numerous dresses. We had to go to three shops and we had to go back to two of them a second time until we ultimately found the ideal, wonderful, beautiful semi dress that she will don tomorrow for about 4 or 5 hours. Great
Aw.
experience. She tried on
Aw.
a lot of dresses, John. I didn't see them all, but she tried on a lot of dresses. She's extremely happy with this dress, and it's exciting time for her, exciting time for mom and dad. First time your day will be coming ahead of you in the future. But it made me think that, you know what? As much work as my daughter put into finding a dress, how many students just passively kind of go, I know about this school, I'll go to this school, and they don't really do a great search of what's possible and what's out there as far as colleges and universities and where they might attend. And John, that's what I want to talk to you today on Committed, the college planning playbook. John, how are you doing, man? How's life in Pennsylvania?
Life is good. I
Philadelphia Eagles, baby. Aren't you an Eagles fan?
I am not an Eagles fan. I am a Buffalo Bills fan. So I live in Pittsburgh. I might be one of the few that are not like diehard Steeler fans.
I'm even a Steeler fan, brother. Look at that.
See, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Now, I am not, again, like I don't root against the Steelers. I don't root for them. I'm a Bills fan. So anybody who's beating Kansas City, I'm a fan of. So I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Super Bowl.
Yes, yes. And they got a thorough beating. My boy Jalen Hurts, former Oklahoma Sooner.
Ah,
So,
right. Yeah.
Jalen had some choices to make when he was in college or looking to go to college. And, that's what I want to talk about today
I,
because I think, I'm in a college town. I'm in Norman, Oklahoma, right? I am at the home of the University of Oklahoma, the flagship university of the state of Oklahoma. And so many people that I work with or we talk to, they'll go, I'm just going to OU. And it's just not that doesn't sound like a lot of excitement. I don't want anyone to go, I just am doing, you want people to be excited. And I'm
say,
curious, why in the world? Why in the world aren't people more excited?
you know what? First off, it's hard to believe that it's mid-February. We're
Yeah.
we're over halfway through the school year, and a lot of these conversations that we've had, they've been based on current seniors and going through the process. And now we're at a place where like, yeah, we're still kind of you know seeing these seniors through to the finish line,
Yeah.
but now we get to start introducing some things to the rising juniors, because before you know it, those apps are going to open up and it's a whole nother cycle, and it's just that revolving door. And what a perfect time to talk about, like, okay, so to your point, you live in this you know ideal college town, and just like how your daughter was out dress shopping, I'm sure whether she recognized it or not, she had an idea of what are all the things on this dress
Mhm.
that she has to have.
That's
Is it
right.
sequins? Is it long? Is it short? So just like anything else, really trying to put together a criteria list for what is everything that my future college needs to have. Because in a year and a half, for a lot of these juniors, they're leaving home, they're going
Yeah.
to a new environment. Why not pick the most perfect situation for yourself?
I mean, I hear you. I mean, you're going to live there for 4 or 5 years. I mean, you really need to know that it's a proper fit for you because the other thing we know is whenever a student transfer, it always costs them time and it always costs them money. So out of the gates, they can be really confident and comfortable with their college pick. It's going to make life a lot easier for them. So, John, I want to share with them, our listeners, our 10 listeners today. I want to share with them what I believe, and I think you would agree, are 5 key factors they need to consider when it comes to a college choice and as they're looking at colleges, things to consider. Now, I would argue that the earlier you start thinking about this, the better. I mean, eighth and ninth graders should start thinking about what's out there because that will help them plan and be more competitive. But the reality is that you could be a junior right now, February 14th of your junior year, going, I have no idea where I'm going to go. Or you could be like the students I said earlier, saying, I'll just go to the school down the street. We would challenge you to really put some consideration into it. So you're not feeling like you're just going somewhere, you're excited about going somewhere. So factor number one, John, is major. You know what? I think that's the most important thing because they are going to college to study something. So what are some things they can do to really dive in and make sure that the school they're looking at and the schools they're looking at have things they can study?
Should be factor number one, honestly.
Yeah,
And, like, every other business, every other entity, every school is going to have their own niche. They're going to have their bread and butter. First off, do they offer what you want to study? Okay, great. That's factor number one. How competitive is that program that you're pursuing?
yeah.
What are the opportunities within those programs from an internship standpoint, from maybe a study abroad standpoint?
Hmm.
And a lot of things that, probably the biggest thing that we now have to look at is whether that program is a pre-program or a direct admit program.
That's right. That's right.
And for those who are not completely familiar with that process, I'm going to use nursing as an example. So, and as absurd as it is that, a lot of these nursing schools are as difficult as they are to get into because there's a national nursing shortage, but the majority of the larger schools that most of these kids want to go to now, they offer what's called a pre-nursing program. Okay, great. So there is no guarantee that whoever is going into the pre-nursing program can end up getting their BSN.
Right.
The way it works is, and let's use University of so-and-so. Let's say that they will accept 500 students into their pre-nursing program. Okay, great. All 500 of those students are going to be taking the same 10 courses throughout their freshman year. And their policy might be to matriculate into the upper division of their nursing program. We have 350 seats.
Right.
So now it's a numbers game. And
Mhm.
based on those 10 courses, the top 350 with the highest GPAs are going to actually advance into the nursing program. The other 150, they are either changing their major,
Yeah.
transferring, or
Yeah.
retaking courses to potentially increase their GPA to then apply for the following semester or probably the following year.
I love that. I love what you're explaining here because many times people will just look up on a college website, hey, do they offer my major? Well, yeah, they could offer your major, but you really need to know, is it a direct admit? All right. Am I like TCU? TCU is highly competitive because they're directly admitting you and they have 100 seats. So their nursing program is highly competitive. But then you also to talk about a pre-program, there's only a certain amount of pre-program admissions, but that doesn't guarantee you admission into the program. So a student, when they're looking at what they want to study, really not only need to know if the school offers it, but the matriculation process to
Right.
actually get the degree. Because guys, you're going to school to get a degree. And what does that path look like? Now, John, one of the things I see a lot of is students who are kind of undecided. They're bouncing in between majors. And I don't know if you would agree with me, but that's when I tell them they need to be really careful about those niche colleges and universities. All right, if you're not heavy into STEM or into engineering, the Colorado School of Mines may not be the best school for you, right? But if
Well,
you're interested in heavy STEM and maybe that small liberal arts school isn't what you're interested in, or when it shouldn't be what you're looking at. And maybe you're all over the place. That's maybe when you need to look at a school like a comprehensive university that offers a diversity of majors, right? Because I believe this, probably lots of students, if they're honest, are kind of undecided, and almost every student changes their major. So how do you navigate that with students and helping them find that fit to where they won't have to transfer even if they have to change their major a little bit?
Your advice is spot on. One of the biggest things now, even when a student who is 16, 17, 18, even if they say with conviction that they know what they want to do, they're still teenagers. They change their minds
I'm
a
50.
hundred
I don't know what I want to do
a
tomorrow.
hundred different times.
I'm 50,
But
brother.
it is most important to pick a school that offers exactly what you could want to study. You don't have to choose. In a perfect world, sure. But and one of the exercises that we do with our students as early as possible, because all these larger universities, for the most part, they're going to have everything business related, everything STEM, everything,
Yeah.
within the humanities. You want to roll in or out as quickly as possible. Engineering, nursing, architecture,
Yeah.
and maybe actuary.
Yeah.
Those are the four things where, they are not offered at every school. So just based on, finding interest or lack of interest in those four things will then either open up this slew of schools or organically kind of narrows it down to, okay, you know what? I'm looking for a 5 year, you know, BARCH accredited architecture program.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
cool. Your list goes from 4,600 colleges down to 100.
yeah. I love that. I think one of the things, it's really hard to ask people what they want to do, but real quickly, you can put in front of a student a list of majors and say, okay, mark through the ones you know you do not want to do. And pretty quickly, you can see there's some themes here, and it can help guide your college search. Because the number one thing you need to be looking for, guys, is you need to be looking for, can I study my interest, and can I ultimately graduate with a degree that I'm passionate about, right? That's the number one factor that you need to look for in a college. Second, John, here's what I think is second most important, because they are going to live there for 4 or 5 years. It is location, right? It's the part of the country. It is is it a big town? Is it a small town? Those different types of things matter. The culture that they're used to. There's a culture in Pennsylvania that going to a different part of the United States is different. There's a culture in Oklahoma. Are they ready for that cultural shift? Location, location, location. It's kind of like the real estate rule. It should be the college rule. How do you talk your students through, thinking about, hey, geographically, this is where you're going to be. Do you understand the culture? Do you understand the location?
It's encouraging the kids really do some soul searching. And you want to think about what is most important to you.
Hmm.
And I'm going to start with, from a family dynamic. How close are you and your parents? How close are you with your aunts and uncles and your grandparents? Because, and you may run into this too, Ren, but the majority of our students, especially when they're underclassmen, they love the idea of, we live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is cold and gray here from October until May. So it's really enticing to want to go to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. And then as they get deeper in the process, they realize whether it's cost, logistics, or I'm actually going to get homesick, it doesn't make the most sense.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
right.
really thinking about, yeah, it's fun to fantasize about living somewhere else. And in a
Hmm.
lot of cases, it's possible, but consider what does that travel trip look like to get to and from
Yeah,
2 to 4 times a semester with all your breaks and spring breaks and fall break and Thanksgiving break. God forbid if something were to happen to grandma, can you just hop in your car and drive an hour and a half? Or is it an 8 hour travel day?
that's right.
Do you want to be in a location that is going to provide you with ample internship opportunities
Hmm.
or opportunities to, be able to work and volunteer with a certain demographic of people?
Hmm.
Or, in Pittsburgh, we go to Steelers games and we wear jerseys. if a Pittsburgh kid goes down to Auburn and it's a female and she's wearing a jersey, she's going to look a little bit different versus all the Southern Belles wearing their sundresses. Like
That's right.
it's, you mentioned the culture. So it's just thinking about all of those things.
Yeah, I think, when I talk to students about, and I think you've alluded to it well, location to me is, they have this dream of living in a big city. But do you know what it's like to live in a big city? Or, they want to get away and they want to go to this great school, but they don't realize how remote it is, right? And there's really nothing around it. And they're used to living in a metropolitan area. And they say, well, there's this great, huge, amazing university here, but the town is rather small. So all of these things mix together with location. But when I'm talking about a student about location, I'm thinking about climate, I'm thinking about culture, and I'm thinking about do they think they can make that transition there? Because not every place is like their home. So when I think about location, I'm really, really curious about, hey, they loved the hot weather. Well, you're going to be going to school typically in the fall and the winter. So not every place is going to have that great mild weather, right? I mean, so helping them think through those things is extremely important when you're looking into college, right? You are moving somewhere. Dallas, you're moving to Ames, Iowa. You're moving to Norman, Oklahoma. You're moving to Stillwater. You're moving to Malibu, California. I mean, all of these things, they're just different, and they have a lot of things, a lot of issues can be tied to that. So you need to think carefully about location. But John, you talked about what I would consider a third factor. It is distance. It is distance. And, every student I know early on is like, oh man, I want to go as far away from home as possible. And then as that senior year comes, the world starts getting a lot bigger and they want to start staying closer. Why do you think that is with a student? And this is important for parents out there to hear. Don't freak out when your kid is a freshman or sophomore is talking about going to school the other side of the world. Typically, not always, typically we see juniors and seniors start shrinking that a little bit more. Why do you think that is, John?
I learn a lot about parenting from being able to do what we do because you can see from another perspective what is pushing kids away from
Hmm.
staying home and what is indirectly drawing them in and
Yeah.
continuing to keep them home. So I plan on trying to implement that with my kids when the time comes. I think kids ultimately want what they don't think they can have. So I think there is that appeal to want to go far away, to want to go experience something different early on. And then when push comes to shove, most of these kids, now granted, there's always the outlier where, the kid's going to go to Pepperdine or they're going to go to Georgia Tech. But for the most part, there's a reason why, so many of our kids go to Pitt and Penn State and Duquesne and Ohio State. And it's initially viewed at as a negative, where so many of our students say, well, I don't want to go to Penn State because, everybody I know goes there. But then I'll ask them, why do you think so many people go there?
Hmm.
It's because it's one of the best schools on the East Coast.
Yeah.
It is in state 2.5 hours. So you're close enough where if you had to come home, you can.
Yeah.
Far away enough where mom and dad are not going to pop in for lunch on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most affordable schools. And
Yeah.
now we're talking bang for our buck.
Yeah.
So I think as the students get closer to and those options become a reality, I
Hmm.
think they then start to think about, okay, what instead of what I want, what makes the most sense?
Yeah. I see students coming to that conclusion who are educated, right? That's one of the things that I really love about the college planning process is that when you're uneducated about it, you just think, oh, it's sexy and I'm going to go all this far away. But as you become more educated about the value that you talked about, the quality that you talked about, and these other factors, you're like, well, even a high school junior and senior can come to the reality that that really makes the most sense, right? It really, really makes the most sense. And we also talk about you're adding cost to your college education every time you have to jump on a plane and you have to fly halfway or all the way across the United States to come home. Right, you're adding a complication in your college experience in that, and the educated junior and senior can come to those conclusions naturally on their own, which is much easier than mom and dad trying to say, well, do you realize this or do you realize that? and trying to argue against them. Because to your point, most teenagers are like what I was when I was a teenager. We want what we feel like we can't have. And so educating them can really help them come to that conclusion. So John, we have three factors so far. Number one, we're going to have to go study something, right? Because we're going to graduate. So we need to make sure they have a major and understand the matriculation process. Number two is location. They're moving somewhere and they need to understand the climate and the culture and the dynamics of, urban or rural or suburban. Number three is distance, how far it is from home and the ease of getting home, right? And the cost of those travel costs that are tied in there. Here's my fourth one. I think it's really, really an important one is size. I mean, with over 4,000 colleges and universities in the country, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I mean, literally for some of my students, there are colleges and universities that are smaller than their high schools, and there are colleges and universities that are larger than the cities they live in. How do you help a student navigate that dynamic of size?
We can have conversations all day long about, this school has 20,000 students. This school has 1,600 students. This school has 5,000 students. You can throw numbers out all day long until they step on campus,
That's right.
until they see what those numbers mean. It goes on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And to take it one step further, there are schools that have 20,000 students, but the proximity of campus is a 10-minute walk.
Yeah.
And then there's schools where there's 5,000 kids and it takes a 15-minute bike ride.
Hmm.
So it is good to initially start by talking about the enrollment, because that usually will indicate how large your class size is, at least for the first year or two. But I cannot stress it enough. And until a kid and a family goes and walks the grounds, it's a really unfair question to ask. And nobody can expect them to know what they want until they see it in person.
I 100% agree because we can talk about, wanting to be on this party in this part of the United States or being, in a large town or a small town, but until you go and experience it, you really don't know. You can talk about how close it is to home or how far it is from home. You get on that plane trip and you realize how long and how hard it was to get across the country or to just get, 2 hours away. You start going, okay, this was what reality is like. And the same with size, you really don't have anything to compare it to until you're on campus and you get a sense of what it feels like. And I think that one of the best things students and their families can do is just when you're driving and you're on a road trip, drive through campuses. It doesn't have to be an official tour. Just I know my daughter was on we were at a cheer competition in Fort Worth, Texas, a couple of months ago, and it was a Sunday. Campus was closed, but we still just drove through TCU so she could see what the campus looked like in its size. But if you're doing an official tour, I always believe that the best time to do an official tour is when school's in session. Right? It's nice to do it in the summer. That's convenient, but you don't get something when you're not when you're there in the summer that you get in the fall and the spring when school's in session, and that's the feeling of the campus when it's full of students, and that gives you a sense of its size, right? Its population, how many students are walking around. I think the other thing to think about also is that how all of these combine together, especially when you talk about location, distance, and size. Because you could be a small school, like NYU is a relatively smaller school, but it's in New York, right? SMU is a relatively smaller school, but it's in really the heart of downtown Dallas.
Yeah.
You could have a school like the University of Texas in Austin, which is a large school, over 50,000 students, and it's in Austin, Texas. It's in a large town. You have small schools that are in small towns. You have large schools that are in small towns. And so all of these three factors, and when it comes to geography and school size, in my opinion, they really blend together because they don't live in a vacuum. Location, distance from home, and the size of campus, those three things all mix together. And to John's point, the best way to experience it is to visit it. And the best time to visit it is while school's in session. So you get a sense of what it really feels like. How would you say that's a fair?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on. And to piggyback off of that, so we're at a time frame now. So mid-February, seniors have to make a decision about where they're going by May 1st.
Yes.
So what is that, 2.5 months?
Yeah.
I can say with confidence that every family that we work with who has made the time to go see the schools are the ones who are confidently selected at this point, and the students and families that are still unsure, it's not because they didn't hear back yet or they got in. It's because prior to this point, they didn't go do their tours.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So if and again, like we're talking perfect world things, life gets in the way. I understand that. But as a parent, knowing yourselves and knowing your students and their anxiety levels, if you don't want to be in a position where you are beyond stressed in February and March and April, make the time to go do your tours
Mhm.
end of junior year, beginning of senior year. So then when those decisions come out in December of your senior year, you've gathered enough information to make those decisions versus scrambling to go get in tours at admitted student days in March and April.
Yeah.
So just food for thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, and maybe you've done your due diligence and you're still stuck, right?
Yeah.
You can't choose between A and B. Uh, I would say that one of the things you can do is go do another visit. Just go do one more visit. You might think, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Well, it's not as much as transferring. It's not as much as your student being miserable and second guessing themselves. So if you're stuck and you're like, I can't choose between A and B, or even A, B, and C, visiting one or two of those schools can really help push you over the finish line in that decision-making process. Visits
Look, look at
are
it. Look
huge.
at it this way too, Ren. And I'm sure there's people out there that they go buy houses sight unseen, or you go look at a car once. But for the most part, like when you're going to make a big purchase, you're going to go and look at it multiple times, and you're going to go do your due diligence.
Yeah, that's right.
You're going to send your kid off to a school for 4 years and pay $200,000, but you're going to make a decision off of a 90-minute tour.
Yeah, no, 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 no. That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to become an educated consumer, as you might say. All right, so we have four of our five. We're going to study something, right? So we need to check and make sure our major and the matriculation path. Number two, location. We're going somewhere. We need to know the geography around that. We need to know, we're going to an urban area, suburban area, rural area, what part of the United States culturally, what part of the United States climate-wise. Number three is distance. How far and how hard is it to get home? And number four is the size of the campus, a smaller campus, a larger campus, all the things that come with this. And there is a fifth factor. It's a fifth factor. The reality is a tough reality. This will cost money. This will cost money. And I believe the sooner a family can start talking about the reality of the college investment, the better. For an eighth and ninth grader, let them know this is what college is going to cost somebody, right? You, us, I don't know, but somebody. And this is why you need to be working hard in school. This is why you need to be doing the things extracurricularly. This is why you need to be paying attention to ACT and SAT prep, because we want to drop that cost and find more value. The sooner, the absolute better we can talk about cost. That's going to make us more educated, and they vary. And really, cost is a value proposition. Cost is a value proposition. What I tell everybody is value is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. It's in the eye of the beholder, because
Good
so one
advice.
of the most important things I think college students and their or high school students and their families can discuss is what do they value in a college education and a college experience, because then that will help them decide what they're going to invest in, because everybody looks at it different. How do you have that conversation with your families about, and your students about understanding the cost?
The priority list,
Yeah.
exactly how you do it. I ask all of my families, when you're making your decision, I want you to rank these three things: reputation, vibe,
Mm-hmm.
cost.
Mm-hmm.
But answering those three things, or I should say ranking those three things, is a really easy way to indicate, okay, we value the reputation of a school, and we see that as the investment to educate them, to build a network, to launch them into career. So we're okay with spending whatever amount of money it takes. Or I would prefer to be at a place where I'm comfortable, where the vibe is right,
Yeah.
without sacrificing too much of reputation and too much of cost. Or you have the people that say, you know what, we're looking for the best bang for our buck. And, we've been in the business long enough now, Rennie, to know if you build us a budget, I can give you exactly what schools are out there that's going to cost under 20,
Yeah.
under 25, under
Yeah.
30.
Yeah.
So really, having those hard conversations and thinking about what is feasible,
Hmm.
what do you value, your
Yeah.
priorities, because you certainly can make a budget if
Sure.
you know where to look and you do your due diligence. And it gets tricky at times because, you don't want to just Google how much does Michigan State cost. I don't trust Google. You have to go into their cost of attendance tab on their actual website, and you have to dig through the out-of-state tuition cost and cost prior to financial aid.
Yeah.
It's time. And then you have to look at, okay, do they give automatic consideration merit scholarships?
Right.
That information is out there, and that's why we have a job, because it takes time and effort and knowledge to know where to look. But if money is important, or it is a more important factor, yeah, the sooner you lay out those numbers, the better.
Yeah.
And I probably piss off a lot of kids, and I think the parents appreciate this analogy, but I always tell them, I'm not going to let my kid go test drive a Range Rover if my budget is for a Honda.
That's right.
So, I mean, the same rule applies.
Yeah.
Don't, allow yourself to fall in love with Miami or Pepperdine or University of Michigan if you're not prepared to spend 90,000 a year.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Because you're going to fall in love with it. Who's not going to fall in love with Malibu?
Right.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Who's not going to sit on the beach at Malibu and go, man, it would be wonderful to go to school here.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And
So
I think the other factor to consider is also, is graduate school or professional school in your future? We got to look at the long run here. If you want to go to dental school, if you want to go to nursing school, it could be a little different, right? If you want to go to PT school, if you want to go to law school, any of those things, there is not just the 4-year degree ahead of you. There's a professional degree, a master's degree, maybe, or a PhD or doctoral level degree. And we have to help people look at this from a holistic, big picture level, because it's about a total investment in a higher education. So big things that as an educated student and as an educated parent and family that need to be considered as you develop a list, as you develop options, because options are always going to empower you as a family. You need to be considering the major and how does it direct admit? Does the school offer it? How do you matriculate through it? Is this going to require ultimately graduate level degrees or professional degrees? You have to have a true understanding of your major and that career end. Number two, you got to think about location, right? Where am I going? Is it a large city? Is it a small rural area? Is it more remote? Is it a suburban area? What's the climate? What's the culture like? Because you are going to live there for 4 or 5 years, and there is such a thing as culture shock. There is such a thing as culture shock. Third thing you need to take in mind is distance. Distance, how close or how far from home. And it's not only in our mind about the distance, and it's about the ease of getting home or the complication of getting home and the affordability or the cost of getting home and how often you think you want to do that. The fourth thing you need to consider is size, right? Campuses come in all sizes and shapes, and how these three things work together is an important dynamic when it comes to the size of the campus, the location of the campus, and its distance from home. That's why visiting campuses are so important, so you get that feel and you truly understand the location, the distance, and the size. And last but not least, it's that cost. It's that value proposition. I love what John said. You need to come in with a clear understanding of what are the priorities for you. What are you looking for in a college education? What's important to you? Because it's what's important to you doesn't have to be, shouldn't be, and probably won't be important to the person next to you. Everybody looks at value different because it's like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. But you need to understand what you're looking for so you can make an educated investment in a college education. John, what's one last thing you would share with our listeners, the 10 of them that are out there? What's one last thing you would share
Oh
with them
boy.
to say, hey, make sure to consider this when you're coming Not necessarily where you're going to college, but coming to make sure you're coming up with a list of colleges that could be a great fit for you.
All right, so I'm gonna spice this up a little bit.
I like it. I like it.
So the five that we threw out, we are two old men. So I feel like most parents would agree with these are the five more important items that we
Yes.
need to look at. Now, if I were to put myself in the shoes of a 17-year-old, which we get to do almost every single day,
Yeah.
I can share a little bit about what are the kids looking for when they're creating their list. So parents, when you're not shocked, or I should say, you won't be shocked when you hear that you may or may not hear on your kids' list, how nice are the dorms?
Yes.
Can I study abroad? How many
Yes.
how many programs are available throughout the year? What countries can I go to? What is the sorority fraternity Greek life?
Yeah.
Um, what's the tailgate situation?
Yeah.
These are all things that are captivating these kids now, and it is, much less about the education that they're going to receive and more about the experience they're going to gain. So, and I think it's meeting each other in the middle.
Yeah.
So the parents are going to have, their expectations of this is what's important to us. The kids are going to have their list of this is what's important to me. Now we have to somehow blend this together. So then everybody's happy.
That's right. I
So
think that's so important, John. As a former higher education administrator and dean of students, I can tell you that there is the ultimate goal is to get that degree, to get that education. But there's also value in the experience a student has. The experience they have by being around different kinds of people, the difference, learning to serve and community service, just, leadership opportunities, study abroad opportunities, but just the opportunity to experience things, prepare them for life. And as a small town kid from northeastern Oklahoma, even though I stayed in state, going to the University of Oklahoma gave me a great education, but the experiences I had helped prepare me. And so there is definitely a value around that. And I think you're spot on. There's students that have never stepped foot on any athletic field in their life, but they tell me, I want a place that has good sports, right? Because they want the experience. And
but
as all of us look at back on our college time, it was not just the world-class education that we received, but it's the experience also that would carry us for a lifetime. So, John, man, great to see you again. We need to do this again soon.
been too
And
long.
let me tell you, there are tons of options out there. None of you should be looking at the school just down the street because it's just down the street. None of you should be going to college just because. It's too big of a deal. It's too big of an investment, and it really is too big of a launching point for your life to just go just because. Become educated and think about all the factors that matter, and most importantly, the factors that matter to you. Because at the end of the day, you need to create your own playbook, the playbook that's going to help you be successful, not just in college, but to help you be successful in life. This is Committed, the College Admissions Playbook.